There we go. All right. I think we are live. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, May 26th, for what is, I believe, our fifth monthly community call for NetBox. My name is Jeremy Stretch. I'm the founder and lead maintainer of NetBox. And with me today, as last month, is Jordan Villarreal, who's our technical advocate for NetBox at NS1.
Hi, everyone.
So today we've got a fairly light agenda, but some interesting stuff to keep you apprised of what's been going on for the past month in the NetBox community. So first off, we'll hit on Cisco Live, which is coming up here in a couple weeks. An introduction to the NetBox Advocates program, which was launched last week. Some miscellaneous community updates. A reminder that we're still looking to hire a software developer, which is apparently one of the most challenging things to do in this market. And then we'll close out with highlighting some feature requests that are in dire need of some community feedback. And I think we have one question in the Q&A this month. And if you're watching this live, feel free by all means to engage in the chat. And we will stop and address any questions that come up. So first off, Cisco Lives happening June 12th through the 15th in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Jordan and I will both be attending, actually, and there are comments in the, there are links in the comments below to a Calendly for each of us if you are interested in meeting. So what we've done is set up some time slots for anyone who would like to meet. NS1 will have a booth there. So if you want to stop by and chat just about NetBox, anything in particular, anything about NS1, by all means, sign up for a slot there and come by. You're also welcome to obviously pop by whenever. This is just kind of helps us better anticipate any discussions that might come up, and we'll be able to better prepare for any particular topics or questions you'd like to raise. So if you see us, don't feel like you have to have a calendar invite. It's just something to better organize our time.
Yeah,
I think go ahead.
No, I was just going to start commenting about the sessions that we have up there. We've learned about a third session because last month when we were talking, we had only heard about the two, and now we've got a third one. I don't remember exactly which one was the third that got added on.
I think it was the wireless one. Yeah, supercharge your wireless network with programmability.
Yeah, that sounds right. But I guess where I was going here is I'm really excited to see these sessions, especially since they didn't come from us. We didn't ask anyone to put anything together. We didn't ask to be included in these. And so just sort of naturally found out about them, just paying attention to social media. So for anyone who has the time available to dip into any of those sessions, I know we're going to try and be in them as well. But really excited to see what the presenters have put together for us. Well, for the community.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we're going to try to attend these as well. We've offered to just kind of make ourselves available to the presenters if there are any questions specifically about NetBox. Happy to field those. Or obviously, if you have any questions after the sessions, feel free to grab us and we'll do what we can to answer those. Ada Tutapa asks, what will be done with a wireless programmability session? I don't have the description in front of me. I believe it's, in fact, even as I was discussing this, I don't know the full end-to-end solution they're going to be demonstrating, but I think the high level is that they're going to be extracting bits of data, configuration data from NetBox and applying that to various Cisco controllers through a means I think yet to be determined. I'm not sure if that's specifically called out in the description, but you can pull these up on the Cisco Live catalog, and it should give you a better feel for what the session will be covering. So one of these is a DevNet session, and the other two are actually workshops, which I think are more hands-on.
They usually are. Yeah. The DevNet area, which has grown drastically over time at Cisco Live, it used to be just presentations, and now they've developed more workshops, which are, you need to bring your laptop in. They typically don't have computers or workstations set up, but generally speaking, they do get a little bit more hands-on, or they're at least easier to follow in real time.
Cool. So yeah, all of these are going to be involving NetBox in some degree, and that seems very exciting. So very cool.
Looking forward to them.
Yeah. Next up, we have the Advocates program. So this is something we launched last week. Still new, but I think we've already had about 40 people sign up to it, which is amazing. And the idea here is that it allows the power users within the community to register as such. One of the challenges that we've had since day one with NetBox is determining, who's using NetBox, how are they using it, why are they using it, and how do I reach them? How do I get better feedback from them? So everything right now through NetBox, or 99% of what we do is through GitHub, basically, right? That's the way we interact. We being the maintainers of the software, that's how we interact with the community. Is you're using NetBox, you have a problem with it, so you go to GitHub, you open a bug report, right? And I, as the maintainer, see the bug report, hopefully fix the bug report, and then fix the bug, and then push that out in a new release. Which is fine, right? Obviously, that's how software development should happen. Feature request, same kind of thing, right? But one of the challenges is figuring out, what bugs are fairly straightforward. But as far as features, what should we be working on? What do people really need? We certainly get feature requests all the time, but the challenge there is an end user has to go through the whole process of figuring out what they want to do, trying to do it in NetBox, running into some kind of problem, and then the most important step is reporting that, right? Capturing that as something they want to do but are as yet unable to, and documenting that in the form of a feature request, which sounds simple, but every time you run into a wall, it's because you're doing something else, right? So the natural inclination is to always say, I'll figure out a workaround, I'll save this for later, I'll toss it on, into the black void of things that ostensibly I'd get to at some point, but probably won't. So it's really difficult to do that. And when we talk about even the feature requests that do make it into GitHub, it's like, well, is this a problem for one person or is it a problem for 1,000 people? And there's other 999 people that just aren't on GitHub. So the Advocates program is a way for us to reach out directly to people who have expressed an interest in doing this. Typically, people who are going to be really more hands-on with NetBox, what I refer to as power users, and ask them, directly about certain things, like, hey, these are our milestones we're planning for the next release. Which of these do you think are more or less important to you? That kind of thing. Like, which ones would you prioritize? When you go to model something, when you're using like the virtual machine object, for example, are you only modeling on-premises stuff, or are you modeling cloud constructs, or a combination? Can you tell us some more about how you're using that? And the reason for the program, rather than just opening this wide, is that we want a way to do this in a way that's not spammy. So we do have our annual survey, and we put that out every March or so, I think. So like we just did one at the beginning of the year, which is great for getting a very high level, broad demographics as to who's using NetBox. But that's not something we want to publish every month, because that's going to get really spammy. No one's going to pay attention to it. The more often you do that, the quicker your participation rate drops off, unless you have a very targeted group like this, where you can be actively engaged, and give more feed. People are more likely to engage, at least this is my theory, if they see the impact of their feedback more directly, right? The annual survey you don't really see any impact from that, because it's more of a demographics thing. But the Advocates program hopefully will result in a more targeted thing, and that's the primary reason for it. We've got a few others that we've noted there as well. Something else that we want to do is potentially provide early access to sort of like alpha testing instances. So this is something like we do the beta releases, obviously, before. Like, we had one for 3.1, 3.2. We'll have one for 3.3 in July. I think we'll have that beta release out. But if we're working on a specific feature, like right now, I've been spending a ton of time on redoing the cabling model for NetBox 3.3. So if I just want feedback on that, what I can do is I can spin up an instance of that branch, deploy that, make that accessible, and send that out to all the advocates and say, hey, I'm working on cabling. If that's something that interests you, can you check this out? And then maybe, report back, or go into the Slack channel, let me know what you think. And we can have a more highly engaging, smaller discussion. I can do that in the public channel as well, but it's kind of nice to have a better idea of, if you have a smaller condensed community and I have an idea of how you're using it, you're not just some anonymous user on GitHub. I know, oh, this is Joe over at, some company. And I have an idea for their industry, and I've talked with them before, and I know how he's doing a specific thing. then that's gonna inform my interpretation of what works and what doesn't work for the individual users. So it's all primarily and just trying to solicit a higher degree of or higher quality, I guess, of feedback.
Yeah, and speaking from just the conversations that we've had around how difficult it can be sometimes to get this sort of information, the fact that we're having people volunteer to speak up and identify themselves and say, "Hey, yes, I want to participate in this," I only see good things coming out of this that are going to benefit the community at large.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And some other points. So we've also recently spun up a community sentry collector. I'll talk about that on the next slide. So the idea is, if you are a participant, and if you're a what we'll call a known user of NetBox, meaning we have a way to contact you directly, like an email address, then we can give you a custom ID to configure on your NetBox instance to start logging errors. So like server exceptions, things like that, to our centralized sentry collector. Then we can correlate them and say, oh, Joe at company X is having a problem. Let me reach out to Joe and find out if he's aware of this, or oh, I know what the fix is, and let me talk more with him about it. So it allows us to take a slightly more proactive approach to this without requiring Joe to stop what he's doing, go to GitHub, and open a bug report. And finally, it's a way to get your organization out there as a NetBox user. Helps you, helps us, and just publicizing how many people use NetBox. Not everyone's able to do that, of course. That's a completely optional part of the program, but it's kind of cool when brands are willing to do that. All right, so community updates in general. I want to welcome Simon Toft as our newest maintainer. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make the call this month. However, he's been present in the project for some time now, and especially active recently. He's already worked on a number of feature requests, including something major for version 3.3. So definitely appreciate him coming on the team. You'll probably see him around GitHub interacting, various issues and discussions. So welcome, Simon. Very much appreciate him joining. If anyone listening is interested in becoming a maintainer, we're always looking for people who are engaged with the project and interested in doing that. So if you're interested, let me know, and we'll see. Second item here was we had a really cool blog post a guest blog post for netbox.dev by Sofia Eroshevich. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name. Recounting her experience as an entry-level network operator, basically advocating for NetBox and open source in general within her organization, and convincing C-level execs to take a chance on this. And it essentially made it much easier for her team to migrate a data center from one physical location to another, which is no small task. And she really walks through like her process of something that I think is great, because a lot of people struggle with this. It's not we need to use NetBox rah. It's we should consider using NetBox, and here's the business case for it, right? She actually does a great job of laying out how she was able to present a business case, a compelling business case for using not only NetBox, but open source software in an environment where open source software was not typically used. It also, touches on automation, like, oh, well, why should you be automating it instead of just paying the intern to do it, right? So very common themes, and it's a really, it's an entertaining story as well. It's just fun to read. So check that out.
And that was actually kind of my favorite part about it is there are so many technical blogs out there about how to do a thing with NetBox, how to plug it into Ansible or plug it into different tooling, but there aren't a lot of user stories that sort of tell it in plain English, which is impressive because she's from Germany and I think English is her second language, but that she was able to put more of a story format out there of how NetBox worked for her, how she was able to sell it to her upper ups. And I think might not be exactly a template, but if you are looking for ways or ideas to how to have those conversations, her blog entry is a great starting point to at least see how one user out there did it.
Absolutely. And finally, on this slide, we've got Sentry, which I just mentioned a little bit earlier. So in NetBox 3.2.3, we shipped the native ability to integrate with Sentry. So Sentry is an open source error collection service. So there's the SaaS product. They're also an open source you can deploy independently on premises or wherever you'd like. Which really, really, really great service. So they've agreed to become a NetBox sponsor. They've actually sponsored our community collector. So what we've done is set it up to enable it on the public demo instance, and it's also there for anyone else who wants to enable on their own NetBox instance. If they'd like to send us error logs, that will help us get a little proactive, get in front of, excuse me, bugs in new releases. And we can see, right after a release, if we push out 3.2.4, for example, and suddenly we're seeing a bunch of exceptions at this one URL from different places, we know there's a bug, right? We don't have to, I'll open a bug report for it rather than waiting for someone to go and report that. And hopefully over time, we'll be able to correlate things like, oh, this bug is occurring, but it's only occurring for a specific model or a specific operating system or something like that. And if you don't want to send us if you don't want to use our Sentry, you can absolutely configure your own account and send that to wherever you'd like. So just a really cool feature. Also, it's really, really easy to do. Sentry makes it just kind of ridiculously easy to implement this with their SDK. It was basically like 3 lines of code and done.
It's always nice when an add-on is that easy.
Yeah, shout out to them for sure. All right. Also want to remind people we are still looking for a senior software developer at NS1. I've had just a heck of a time trying to get people. Admittedly, what we're looking for is kind of something of a unicorn position, in that we want someone that has reasonable expertise working not just with Python but with a Django web application framework on which NetBox is built, as well as some degree of background in networking and infrastructure. So not a deal breaker if you don't have it, but it helps a lot to be able to understand prefixes and VREFs and all the intricacies and caveats that come with physical networking infrastructure. But if you're interested, we are currently hiring out of the US, the UK, or Ireland. It is fully remote, but you just have to reside in one of those 3 countries. If you're interested, there's a link in the description below the video, or just go to ns1.com/careers. All right, so that's my pitch for that. Feature requests. So we have a number of open feature requests right now. I think we've got like 30 or 40 of them that are labeled as under review. So I had the idea that I would just pick a few of them that seemed most pressing or most interesting and mention them on the call. So there's 5 that I came up with, and these are all currently just waiting for more people to comment on them. So this is a great example of how you can contribute to NetBox without writing a line of code. Right, it's just sharing your opinion on some of these things. Right, so great. Number 1, for example, 8113. So I think I opened this one. This is basically a proposal to make slugs optional. So in NetBox, when you go to create a site or a few other the different models, we'll use site as an example. You have to give it a name, but then you also the UI will automatically generate a slug for that. So that's a URL friendly string of text, absent most punctuation. It's basically just like alphanumeric and dashes in there. And in older versions of NetBox, that was actually used as part of the URL. Some time ago, we changed to just use numeric IDs for simplicity and consistency. So slugs don't really have much of a role right now, although some people have gotten to use them for, I think there's like one comment in there where they use it as an actual site code. So they might call it, Las Vegas, Nevada, but the site code is like LAS26 or something, which is perfectly valid. The proposal here is to make slugs optional rather than mandatory. So if they're defined, they'd still be unique and still used. It just wouldn't be a mandatory requirement. So interested to see what people think about that. 8356, a new model for virtual machine storage. So like right now, and with a virtual machine, you can only define a static amount of, I think, gigabytes of disk space that are attributed to it. This would allow people to better manage individual hard disks that are mapped to a virtual machine, and just kind of want to get more context around that, what would and would not be useful for people as far as the actual implementation. You'll find going through NetBox features or feature requests that a lot of the discussion kind of stalls around not what should we do, but exactly how should we do it, right? What does the actual implementation look like? You can say, oh, well, I want to model hard disk for virtual machines. And everyone says, yeah. But then you go to write the code and say, okay, well, what does that mean, right? That's a model. What do we call the model? What fields does the model have? How does it relate to virtual machines? Should it be required or not? Should we get rid of the existing field and move that to different models? And all these little questions that come up that you often, don't really get to until you set about actually writing the code to do it. 8904 was the PRP interface type. So someone suggested this, which was new to me. I learned about this. The parallel redundancy protocol, I think is what it was called. So it works very similar to link aggregation groups or lags, which adding the type itself is a non-issue. The question becomes, well, how does that impact the way we treat lag interfaces, right? Should these be treated the same way? Is there an effective difference between the two? As far as how NetBox makes assumptions about lag membership and things like that. So looking for more people who've had experience with those. 9249, so that's case sensitivity for devices and virtual machines. This is one of those things where the proposal is to remove case sensitivity when determining uniqueness for a device name. That would make device one with a lowercase d equal the same as device one with a capital D, which currently it does not. And that's the reason for that is basically just how databases work by default. So this is one of those things where I think most people agree that it sounds like a good idea. However, we want to be cognizant of anything that it might break. So we're just really trying to capture any use cases where this might break something for a user. And it's kind of hard to imagine one. But given the breadth and popularity of NetBox, likelihood is that there's someone somewhere out there that it will break for. And that doesn't mean that we won't do it, but we want to capture that and be aware of that and come up with a potential solution and, of course, document that and kind of say, hey, if you were relying on this assumption, it's changed. Here's what you can do instead and put those in the release notes. So just trying to capture more of that. And finally, dashboard widgets. So this one came about from, I think, one or two other feature requests. And the idea is instead of on the NetBox homepage, instead of showing just a static count of different objects and the most recent changes, we'll actually allow users to configure what bits of data they have in there. There's some examples in there about what we could display as far as like specific statistics, change logging, other content, plugin provided content, so that plugins can actually inject stuff onto the homepage as well. I think that was a separate feature request. So just interested in gathering people's feedback and ideas around that.
And then for each of these, Jeremy, I know we said that this is a good non-code based way for people out there in the community to participate. Are we looking for people who are like more experienced, like they understand the code background even a little bit, or can somebody come in and just say, hey, I've used PTP before and this is how, or sorry, PRP, this is how it worked for me, this is what it worked, or this is what it worked with, this is what it was compatible with. Like we're just taking end user input along with this as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to know anything about the code, you don't have to understand Python. You don't have to know how NetBox works internally. It's great if you've used NetBox before, certainly. Yeah. But we're really just looking to gather that real world experience, right? Well, one of NetBox's main strengths is being able to leverage the feedback of its community in a constructive way, right? Where we can say, NetBox is one of the few tools, if not the only tool, that's able to model things so generically, but also like robustly, because we have the feedback from the community that's using NetBox, right? We know what works and doesn't work at scale. We know we're able to identify, the lowest common denominator in a lot of cases as far as like, what is a network device? Well, if you ask someone at Juniper, they're going to give you a different answer than someone at Cisco or someone at Arista, et cetera, right. Et cetera. But with NetBox, we know, okay, this is what all network devices need, right? We know they have interfaces, we know they have console ports, et cetera. And we're able to do that because the community, when we put a feature request out there for a new model or something like that, people have all these different backgrounds and experiences, then we can kind of find the commonalities among all of those, and bake them into the product.
Yeah, no, I think that really is a great way. We had a comment in chat of someone who's looking to who can't help much on coding, and I know you don't have to be a coder to use NetBox, and this is a great way to contribute to it if you can't code.
Absolutely. All right, with those out of the way, those weren't the only 5, by the way. I think, like I said, there's like 40 or so feature requests open right now that are looking for additional comment, but I thought those were some of the most interesting. With that out of the way, let's move on to Q&A. We just had one question this month. Rob asks, are there any collaborations coming down the pipe? There are, but I don't think there are any at a point yet where we can reasonably talk about them. We're exploring different integrations with tools like ServiceNow. Glueware, I think, is one we're checking out. We haven't gotten to the point where we're actually collaborating with any of those organizations yet. This is more of kind of trying to figure out, both NS1 and on the open source side, what is most appealing, what should we be looking at building out, and in all different aspects, right? So if you consider the life cycle that we have, I apologize for not having the graphic up here, but there's always this idea that you have NetBox as your source of truth, and that feeds a provisioning tool, and then you have monitoring tools that watch the operational state of the network, and different integrations with each of those. What makes the most sense to work on first? It's kind of an open question, but I expect to see some real movement in that space in the second half of this year, at NS1 at least, if not on the open source side, because I know we're interested in. We've had a lot of people who are interested in NetBox Cloud, so that's the NS1's commercial SaaS hosted version of NetBox. I've been asking for integrations with specific things, so that's probably something that you'll see us pursue more aggressively here toward the end of the year and into next year. Sorry, that's kind of a non-answer, but that's the best I can do right now, is to tell you that there are some things in the works. All right, that is it for this month. Couple minutes left. I hadn't seen any other questions pop up, but if you do have questions after this, if you're watching this after the fact, by all means, head over to the NetBox channel on netdev.chat, our community Slack, and pop in there, or on GitHub. You're certainly welcome to open a GitHub discussion. As a reminder, I've got links to, I think, everything we talked about today in below the video. And yeah, that should be it. Jordan, you have anything else?
Just one last thing. I actually went and looked up that wireless programmability session. Sorry about that. At Cisco Live, and I just wanted to mention, it looks like they've changed the way that they do the workshops. They provide laptops now for people to sit down and work on, but you do have to be registered in advance for that. So if any of those workshops are of interest to you and you are registered to come to Live, make sure you jump in there and get on that list, because it looks like there's 12 per session, and I imagine they're going to get eaten up pretty quick.
Yeah, for sure. It's some very, very cool stuff. Thanks for pointing that out.
Absolutely.
All right. And if you guys are going to Cisco Live, like I said, stop by, say hi. Look forward to meeting everyone.
Same here.
All right. That will do it for May, and we'll see you all again next month. Thanks, everyone.